Morning, everyone. So this is a kind of all-encompassing update video. We're going to talk about the Doge tournament, not only how I felt the new changes were, but also how I felt I did and my team, even though it's not technically over yet. I'll talk a little bit about Dark Elves since I've been playing them, and then we'll talk a little bit about Warriors and thoughts on that. So the Doge tournament had a couple changes from normal tournaments that I run. The two biggest ones, or the two ones being the pairing system was different, and we added two new scenarios that you can see on the board here or on the screen. So we'll start with the scenarios. They were the rounds 2 and 3, so it's been a while since it's round 5 now. I will say that I really did like the thin their ranks, which is basically just a change to capture the flags. The biggest changes were, and I'll explain them. You can read them, but it's actually kind of easier to explain. So if a unit, in normal capture the flags, if a unit is destroyed, you get a point. We all know this. But if you get to half or a quarter, or if it's decimated, if it's shattered, if it's fleeing, you don't get anything, right? It has to die. It has to. So, one model fleeing at the end of the game, it doesn't count for flags. And I never liked that. I thought that was dumb, because if it gives up victory points, I feel like it should give up something for capture the flags. So that was a change we made. Essentially, if you give up half your victory points, you give up half for capture the flag. Oh, half a point for capture the flags. If you give up all your victory points, whether you're fleeing, dead, fleeing and shattered, then you give up a point for capture the flags. And on top of that, we added something, and I don't think this one's completely necessary. I think just the half point thing would make capture the flags way better. But we added something where if your unit's in your deployment zone at the end of the game, you give up half a point. So if you're fleeing and in your deployment zone, you're a full point, because it's maxes at 1. That was a little confusing, but I think it's pretty intuitive once you it's pretty easy once you kind of picture it, right? If you give up whatever victory points you give up, that percentage, that's how many points you give up of 1. And then add a half a point if you're in your deployment zone. Your own deployment zone, and it's caps at 1. So a shattered unit in the deployment zone is a full point. Anyway, I like that. I think it promotes. Getting out of your deployment zone. And maybe you need the deployment zone part to get people out of it. That one seemed to get positive reactions. I know I won the scenario because of it, because my opponent had like two single dwarves fleeing, and I got full points for him instead of getting 0. So that's a big deal. I actually like that one. Tug of War, which was essentially hold the ground, but it moves every time you win it. You get to move it 3 inches, but you don't win it till the end of the game. I think how this one went in my head was a lot different than how it actually played out. I felt like it would actually give the advantage to maybe the person going, who sometimes in hold the ground, you got to give it up a turn or two, and then you just got to win in the end of the game. And usually you can win in the end of the game if you just crush it, crush through the enemy. And I guess I thought this one was like, as long as you crush through the enemy by turn 6, you'll get it. And I think what happened a lot of times is there was like a standoff that happens. Someone gets the scenario, which in normal hold the ground, it's like, okay, they got it for a turn, but but I got some time. But in this one, they dragged it back to them, and it was like impossible to get to because it was just too far back in their lines, and they could keep backing up out of your range. So I guess, in some armies, they need to thin out the army a little bit, and then they can go in and get it or contest it. And I think this one just made it actually so much better to be the person who got in the middle, because you get it, and then you can start backing up out of range, and now the enemy's forced to come forward, and it kind of makes the battle line weird. It ended up not working out. I think that one people didn't love. I don't think it ruined the round, but I don't think it worked out. I wouldn't do that one again. I would consider thinking of another one. I do think it's kind of interesting to throw in a round or two that's different. I think it's nice to not change up the game entirely. I don't want to change how Ninth Age is played. And I get when you play a lot of tournaments, eventually you want changes. And I know I'm in a tournament with Thomas's tournament where I'm playing gnomes, and I will be honest with you. After getting into it and just saying, all right, I'm going to play gnomes and playing versus these random army books, it's actually pretty fun. I actually very much enjoy it. I wouldn't want to do it all the time, but I do enjoy it. And I think the only thing, and Thomas and I talked about this, that hurt that tournament was he hyped it up. It was hyped up, but it was too far. It was too far away. And so I think when you have to read a bunch of new army books that are made up or homebrewed, you really have to ride the momentum of like the hype, right? Because I think after like a month, I mean, hell, if I didn't make a list with Thomas a month before the tournament or a couple weeks before, I wouldn't have had a list for the tournament because I stopped thinking about it for 2 weeks. I just knew it was coming. So I think if he does the homebrew stuff again, I think that's a big, a cool change he should do. Nonetheless, that's been fun. But as far as changes go, I like small changes, changing some scenarios. I know England's doing that Wandering Wizard thing where anyone can pick any spell lore or something. I think it's actually kind of a neat idea. I don't know if I'd love playing in it because it's like I feel like I'm always quote unquote training for something, whatever it is, gnomes aside. And I don't know, that's like almost too wacky for me. 5 weeks of it. Gnomes is 3 weeks. It's kind of like it's super jokey. Like that's fine. I think either go jokey or go like in the middle. Again, I think it's an interesting idea. I just at least when you're playing a scenario that's not like the perfectly flagged scenario, you're still playing your army and learning your army. Anyway, moving on. We also changed the pairing system. So normal 5-man pairing system. We all know the ETC system. If you don't, I'm not going to go through it just because it's look it up. Most of my fans should know what the ETC pairing system. And in this system, we modified a little where you put up 3 armies. You give 3 armies away to the opponent. You keep 2 for yourself. And then so my opponent gives me 3 armies. I have 2 in my hand. I get to pair those 2 versus any of the 3 that are out there. And then the odd man out goes back and play each other. I will say it was uniquely different, but not better than the ETC system. I think the biggest problem I saw is there was a lot more lopsided matches. Not in all the rounds, because I did the pairings, and usually I held myself and Thomas back almost every time. One time I didn't. And I feel like it can produce some pretty lopsided matches for the people that go over. And not like in a fun way. And I guess it puts a lot more pressure, I'll say, on the people who are in hand, assuming that they can get a really good matchup to like crush it. And I don't know, it didn't feel good. We had a very solid orc army played by a good player. And I feel like orcs are a good blocker army. And I think in the normal ETC style, when you block with something, which is really the first thing you put up, you can at least take the second best, right? Or the second worst. Because a lot of times, like some of these lists, like these orc lists, are pretty good versus most things and maybe kind of shitty versus like one army. Like one army just crushes it. The problem is in this pairing system, there's a good chance you just get that army that crushes you. And when you have armies like demons and stuff that you want to protect because they have scourges and whatnot, you kind of can't hold those armies. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I felt like our ID, our warriors and stuff, warriors, for example. Warriors, I felt like are a nice army here because they can handle most things. I think most people, they can give a game versus most people. Most people are scared of them. And they're also fairly good to pair for because they're a strong, aggressive army. I don't know. It just felt like I felt bad for our orc player because I felt like he kept getting awful matchups. Just straight up awful matchups. And it's like, well, if it was the old system and they give you your second worst, we would have preferred like if there's a big jump between the worst matchup and the second worst matchup, and the second worst matchup. Anyway, I didn't like the pairing system. It felt very skewy. It felt weird. Would I do it again? Possibly. I don't know how. I wouldn't do this one again. I think I would change it again. I don't know how I would change it, but two picking three feels like a lot of choice. And maybe if you played this multiple times, like multiple tournaments with this system, people would get better at making armies for it. Like I think there are a lot of armies out there that are just like, listen, I can handle most things. It's not that bad. Just send me over. But they can also be specialized. Like I felt like we were not trapped into holding specific armies, but like if you looked at our armies, you could probably have a pretty good sense we were going to hold Scourge demons. Like I just feel like you have to for most of the part. Like, and again, you don't have to, but it just felt like the best thing we could do, and it worked out. I mean, he scored a lot of points, so that's good. Anyway, it was interesting, but I prefer the old system. So the tournament itself is not over yet. In fact, and this is not correct because like these games they finished their rounds. Like these people have all finished 5 rounds, and some of the people below haven't. Well, they have, but they're just low. It really is between. Well, I mean, a lot of teams could do it. It depends on who caps. So we can look at the team pairings. So they haven't played any games yet. They're going to be playing over the course of the next week, even though it technically ends today. The Los Pentos guys are at the Spanish qualifiers and for ETC. And so there's no reason to force them all to play or make them like handshake games when they're on the top table of this online tournament that has no reason not to end. There's no reason it has to end today. So they're playing it out. And then we have rounds down here, which anyone could jump depending on how this goes. We're basically tied. I mean, we need to go big or we can't win, which is fine. I mean, at this point, we're just going to try to go big or go home. So, but it's been fun. Yeah, I mean, nothing else to say about the results. We'll see how the Polish and the Spanish end up. Yeah, I think so far we've done well. I think my game. So my game myself. I think this was the biggest game. This game that I lost. I think me losing this game was the biggest deal of our round, per se. Because I think we paired for it. It was one of the ones I picked. Well, I don't know. I mean, he still had a lot of magic and shooting to kill me, so I don't think it was like, it's not a shut. It's definitely not like a bright green matchup or anything, but I think me losing so many points and being so far down just hurt us a lot. I just think it was a problem. Yeah, I think I paired poorly here. I think I should have took the Empire. I don't think I'm that bad versus him, and I didn't know if the Warriors were going to get him. It just felt like I should have took the Empire list. Anyway, that's my fault as a pairing person. But as far as Dark Elves are concerned, this was my list. It was they're fine. Let's see what I liked and what I didn't like. I liked this guy. Was good. This guy, I didn't like the shield breaker. It had, I mean, in the end of the game, it did do some stuff. It always has potential. In fact, the one fucking KOE army I played where I was like, this is going to be awesome. I'm strength 4 shield breaker. He had an item that he had the Tristan's whatever sword shit that destroys your items. And it destroys your magic weapons. And I was like, fuck this game. I didn't like the shield breaker personally. It wasn't really, to be fair, that wasn't my idea. It was, I got it from someone else. I just didn't like it. It just felt like I wanted to be strength 5. Like, it feels like Hero's Heart or something would have just been stronger on him. I don't know, just some better weapon. I didn't like it. Maybe if I change the magic and stuff, it'll have more uses, but that's probably my commentary on that item. Outcast, I didn't like Cosmo at all. I kind of hated it, to be honest with you. I'm not saying it's bad. Unity has a lot of uses. especially with like new VS and stuff like that. But geez, it just felt. It's just like you can't twist the spells like a high elf or even the Empire version can. Like you can't really utilize the -1 to cast as much as because Touch of the Heart is a great example. It's a 7, right? So on 2 dice you use a 6 usually, but Dark Elves need a 7, which I agree. Our ability, the -2, is really powerful if you play it the way it needs to be played. Where it's like I'm 4 or 5 dicing the best spell I have, and fuck you, like it's going to be hard to dispel it. But I feel like other than Unity, like they don't have that. It didn't feel like I had that spell all the time. I mean, I 5 dice strength in my last game. I was just like, fuck it, I need to get this spell off. It just didn't feel good because even like the 7 or 8s that you have, even if you weave in that -1, like for example, an 8 to cast. An 8 to cast becomes a 7 with a master, becomes a 6 if you get the right Cosmo thing off. And that becomes like a nice, potentially 2 diceable thing. But it's that 6 to 7 on 2 dice is a real big deal. And you don't really trust it. So you don't do it. Even the lower spells, like the 5s and 6s, are kind of annoying to cast into. Like you just don't feel the weaving in and out. So I didn't feel like I loved Cosmo. I mean, the heal, yes, you have 2 single models and it can be good, but it's like a 3 dice heal, and I didn't heal that much. If I kept playing Dark Elves, I would probably play Evo Magic. In my gut, I feel like I want to try Evo. I just feel like reroll to wound with lethals is just amazing. Obviously, it's probably the best spell, one of the best spells of the game, if not the best spells. I don't know. I just feel like there's more spells to force through. I kind of like the idea that I've seen of Evo Master and the Adept Legate. I think and then I guess you should take Militants at that point. But I do like I wouldn't take the General Adept without the Legates or the Militants because it feels like, especially with the recent changes and stuff, it feels like you do want to get the most out of your blades that you can and his actual abilities. But just as a magic phase, I feel like that is really good. I think Glory of Gold is an amazing spell. Having access to Lash is amazing. And then Evo, the snipes, if you're against things that get sniped, it's scary. Like, they pretty much think of a phase like a 7 phase, right? 7 to 5. And you have a character without MR. Let's just take it. Maybe you have an MR. And they hasten the hour you, and you let it go because you kind of have to. And then it's like 4 versus 5 dice, Touch of the Reaper. And you're just like, shit. It's like 50-50 against a Dark Elf caster. And then the next turn, if you ever have 1 wound left, they just freaking like 5 dice hasten the hour, and you're like, oh, it's like 60% chance that they get it off because of the way the Dark Elf rule works. I don't know. I just feel like I want Evo. I wasn't a huge fan of Cosmos, but it did its job. The Legate, I like this guy a lot. I obviously only being an adept or an apprentice is whatever. Lash is fine. Though the new H spell might help a lot. I like the new H spell a lot more than the shitty H spell. Good unit. Auxiliaries are really good. Dread Knights are fine. I had them because I had two Cowboys. I didn't love them. They're good. They do a lot of damage. Don't get me wrong. They killed a lot of shit, but they also just kind of did nothing sometimes. Acolytes, fine. I actually didn't love, like, I would have, like I said, I would have rather not taken the champion, just maybe taken a smaller unit for, being annoying, fast cab while still fighting, and just get my magic somewhere else. It felt like I didn't love their spells. Like, reroll to hit is fine, but when you're way out on the flank, it's whatever. And then effigy is whatever. This was fine. That's all I can say. I don't really have a huge, like, it went up in points. Black Cloak's going up in points. If we want to talk about that, if we want to talk about the Dread Elf changes for a second, I do think that this is a good change, but I think the power of Black Cloaks has really changed. And people are going to be like, oh, they're still like poison shooting scouts. Well, we have those in the game already. They're called chameleons. That being said, I think the AP 0, and I get it, we hit better, we fight in combat, we have +1 to wound, blah, blah, blah. But one of the big strengths of these guys was you could stand at 12 inches, let's just say from an Elder, for example. You shoot 10 times, they probably have to take 2 saves on 4+. Then they charge you, then they take another save or 2 on 4+, and then you have X amount of poison attacks. They probably take another save or 2 on 3+. And that sounds pretty good. And now, like, if you do the same thing, their save is 1 better. I mean, that's really all it is, but it's a big deal. Like it's a big deal for those 4+, 3+ save monsters out there, or the 2+ save knights. Like you could do that to a 6-man Bretonian pack or KOE, and you have a good shot of like causing a panic check or 2 if like a 6-pack charged you. Like you walked up, shot them, get charged. And I'm not saying, they should make it if they have BSB and stuff, they're probably going to kill you. But like that kind of thing. Like, sure, if you get behind somebody, you're still going to blow them up, but you don't kill fast cav as fast. You can't do it first turn because you won't be in range because the closest you can get is 8 inches. Unless they let you unless you can hide in a terrain piece and get closer there. Sure, it's versus demons. It's still the same shit because they don't really have armor. But it's definitely a downgrade. I think the AP one, think of like 5-up save. I mean, one thing I used to do would be 12 inches in front of an infantry unit, shoot them. They charge me, I stand and shoot them. Maybe they don't make it. Maybe it's an 8 to charge me, 7 if they're 8 if they're movement 4. Maybe they don't make it, and I just do it again. And if they make it, I'm a chaff piece at some point. So I do think their output is definitely going down, and their points went up by 10. So, I mean, they can only take 2 units now. You can't take 3. I like that change. I thought spamming 3 units of them was annoying. But I don't think they're bad, but I don't think they're as vile as they were when they came out. And to be fair, I think there's struggles, maybe air quote struggles, of finding points for them. Not only in the your army, but also your shooting cap. Because I'm starting to think I really like the auxiliary. I hate this name, Selexian. I like the auxiliaries a lot. Oh, they are max 25 models. See, look, you can't even make a Death Star like Seaguard. But I mean, they put out a lot of fucking damage. Like that's a lot of shooting for 230. For 230, you get 30 shots. I mean, 230. Let's do some math. Can't do it. It's hard to compare to cloaks because I mean that's 7 cloaks. So you get double the shots, no poison, of course, but you're also like your core academy trained with hand weapon shield, parry, and +1. Like these guys are nasty. March and shoot is just fine. Like I think these guys, I think you could get a lot of your shooting points in auxiliaries, and you would be pretty happy. I think spears are really good, but I also, I mean, hell, if you take Evo Magic, I mean, these guys are just as good to cast Reroll the Wound Lethal on, right? They're still nasty for it. I mean, these guys as well. I don't know how good these guys are. They're probably pretty good if you kick the guy that goes in them. Yeah. Anyway, that was my point. I think the crossbows are pretty nice. I don't know if you have to take 2 shade units. I think you still can. I wouldn't say they're nerfed into the ground. But I do like that it feels like you have a choice whether you can take it or not. We won't talk about every Dark Elf change, but I'll talk about the hereditary. So the hereditary is funny because the old one, some people like to tell me that it was super broken, and then I will tell you that I maybe cast it 1 time in 1 game, Did I even cast it? I might have cast it because I had 7 spells, and I think Lash was useless, and I took it on my BSB. I never cast that spell. I mean, is there a perfect storm scenario where it's pretty good? Sure. Maybe your demonettes are fighting my spear unit, and I cast it on you, so you rip apart yourself when I'm about to lose 30 elves. But if you looked at my list, I don't have a ton of bodies. I have a decent amount, but they're not like, it's not as, like, when you play the game, there's not as many situations where you're like, oh shit, look, I got, it happened here. Like, I needed it here. Sometimes fights were either super lopsided or I wasn't taking that much damage. Like, it's not like I go into a fight and say, oh man, I hope I'm going to lose 30 elves so I can fucking rip them apart with my hereditary or something like that. Or, you put it on a Hellblaster and it's not like they're going to shoot your expensive unit. And so, to kill a Hellblaster with this spell, you have to kill 8 models on average. And it's like, oh shit, like if he kills 8 Knights or 8 Blackguard or Obsidian Guard, sometimes it's just worth it. Or they just stop the damn spell. So I don't think I didn't like the old spell. This new one's interesting. So it's like the High Elves where you get 18 inches, and then, except it's not the High Elf one because instead of saving your models, you do damage. We'll see how it goes. I think it has some more uses. One thing I like is, for example, a mortar. I lost a lot of elves to a mortar the other day. A mortar, if it hits and does its job, will probably kill itself if you cast the old H spell on it. The problem is, it's like a 3-dice spell because it was an 8. I believe it was an 8. Even if it was a 7, it was like a 3-dice spell. And if it misses, it just fucking does nothing. Right? It does nothing. And so, at least with this one, if you put it up, you can do it versus a model that does something. Like let's say they have 2 mortars and an archer unit or something. Like, at least if the mortars miss and then the archers hit, you can just do it to the archers. You can. It's a little more like it's flexible. Like they only need to do 1 wound. You can decide if you want to do it. You don't have to pre-guess. So, for example, you could just not shoot the damn thing, or you could shoot at something that's like high value, high damage. Like a Hydra. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he put the spell on my mortar. I'm going to shoot the Hydra because if I do 3 wounds to the Hydra, then I'm happy, because I'm just hitting with the center. Stuff like that. Like, this one I like a little more. Could it be? I think it'll be annoying for a lot of armies because if you think about it, Dark Elves are prone to getting shot up or magicked up. And so putting this out there might be really helpful, It's like, oh shit. It's average of 6 hits to a bolt thrower, so it has a decent shot to like one-shot a high elf bolt thrower, or at least over 2 turns. You have to have it up for 2 turns, so that's kind of like the shitty part. But I don't know. It seems more flexible, so I kind of like it. And they kind of destroyed the Altar Star because you can't use this pendant with it. And it doesn't have blades all the time, so it's like it used to be just the altar and the temple exarch, and you would just, you could put them in a big spear unit and it wouldn't matter, and now it gains spears when it's in spears, and while that's still good to have spears in that model, because, let me just look at it real quick. This thing with spears is pretty good because it's AP 1 base, so it's AP 3 when it gets charged with spears, and it has, 6 AP 3 attacks. But now it doesn't get. Maybe it's better. Now it's Frenzy, which is annoying. The fact that you can't get the banner is annoying. It lost a wound. I don't know if it's better or worse. It can leave the unit, but it's only 6 attacks, Strength 3. AP, it doesn't have any weapons when it leaves the unit. I don't know if it's better or worse. I'm just glad it doesn't feel like you have to take it anymore. Thunderpack got cheaper. Thunderpack, new OP. Harpies. I think people complained about the change. People wanted 5 models because they were complaining that 8 models was too hard to fit in like spaces they needed to fit. Which, sure, I guess that makes sense because you pretty much have to go 4x2. Because you go 8 wide, you're 2 wide unless you're chaffing. If you go 4x2, I guess it's easy to like block people to block like you. Like now. with like war machines, right? If you have the circle base and the 1-inch rule, you can always fit like 5 harpies wide can fit in the 1-inch rule all the time because they're less than an inch wide. Whereas 8 harpies could easily be blocked. But the thing is, people expected their points to go down significantly. They actually went up from 150. What were they before? Let me look. They were 155 for 8, and now they're 170 for 5. But a lot of it's because like there has to be a point, and sure, there's other examples of cheap chaff in other armies like flying chaff, but there has to be a point where like flying chaff can only cost so little. And honestly, things like saber-tooth tiger, like the tigers of ogres. There's just some chaff that shouldn't be that cheap and that fast. Like 80-point single model move 16 guys are just like too good of chaff. So I don't know how I feel about the change, but anyway, about Dark Elves in general. I've liked them, but I haven't loved them. And this has nothing to do with what I think about the power of the army. Probably my biggest complaint about them is, first off, I think a lot of people... So I'll tell you my first complaint that I had before I played a lot of Dark Elves. It felt like they were really bad in some matchups. Like, they're not good against Pyro, and they're kind of shitty against like a lot of other shooting, like maybe High Elves. And that felt... But they were really good in like other matchups. Like, they felt like they were, we'll say, rock, paper, scissors, but to the extreme of like, oh, this matchup either feels unplayable or it feels like it's too easy because my models are just all better. After playing more, I think I have lowered that opinion a little more. I think there are still some very hard matchups for other armies. I think some of it comes from how people play. Like, at the end of the day, like my list, at the end of the day, some Dark Elves are more infantry heavy. And don't get me wrong, Giant Obsidian Guard, like, some people just can't fucking deal with it. And maybe that'll be addressed over time. They already went up in points. But, you know, sure, you can't charge them in the front with, like, your monster. They're going to kill you. But if you hit them in the flank, like, they lose the 1+1 to wound after that. Like, if you can outmaneuver them, or like force clips and stuff, their +1 to wound goes away after the first turn. So like after that, they're just normal elves, and they're still decent fighters, and they're still not bad. I'm not trying to say they're garbage, and you know, Obsidian Guard are still really good, but like there's a lot of complaint about +1 to wound, and I don't think that's going away ever. And it's a very, very, very powerful ability. But I think that the way people play is also influencing how good that is. Does that make sense? Like, some people just charge you, and like they're like, fuck it, and then they die. And I feel like there are things, like for example, when this book came out, we all thought, or at least I did, that warriors were going to get stomped on by Dark Elves because of this +1 to wound shit. And I can tell you right now, that fucking, you put Exalted Herald out there, and he, like, has a fucking field day. And, like, Warriors, like, shit on this Dark Elf a lot. Like, I think they still hang. I think the Dark Elves can still hang. I think the Warrior player still has to play well. But, from what I've seen, like, the Warriors players, like, do a lot of work. Because they have fast single models. You know, Elders don't have big frontages. You still need 5s to wound. They have decent weapon skill. Like a Giant, you know, gets hit on 2s, an Elder gets hit on 4 or 3s, it has a better save. If you flank them, they're fucked because they lose the +1 to wound, and now all of a sudden they're wounded on 6s, and you just stomp them out, and they're expensive infantry. The Herald, they don't really have enough shooting to take care of him because he can heal, he can do a hard target, he can just blast off your shooting with, like, missiles and stuff. And they have high armor, and the Dark Elves aren't amazing versus armor. Like they have, my list had the Shield Breaker. It had the Knights with Strength 6, had Spear guys. It had some things to deal with it because I knew I had to deal with it. But it's not like I was naturally like amazing versus armor, and especially when you only get AP1 at short range now, that helps Warriors even more because like they have like a bunch of 3-up save models, and the Dark Elves are like, well, my AP, unless I'm right up near you, is like 0. So I guess where I was going with that was, yeah, maybe maybe normal ogre lists just get screwed by Dark Elves. But I think as people adapt how they play, like, it'll get better. Like, I think if you have, like, a Sentinel, you can still, like, blow up a lot of elves before they get to you. I don't think people, I don't know. I don't think it's as, like, doomsday and unplayable as people say. I think you just have to do some things better. But that's what I didn't like about Dark Elves. I guess what I didn't like was that stigmatism or that idea that you couldn't play some matchups. I think that probably bothers me a little more. But all armies have that kind of, you can't play this. It's just too hard. Do I think they're a good ETC army? I do. I think if you had a good player on them, I've played like 15 games, maybe 14. I haven't felt like I'm good with them yet. I won 4 games. I was on a top team. I did fine. But I didn't feel comfortable on them yet. And maybe it was my list. I would probably change a bunch of things and play different styles. I've just been playing the same style with the 2. I just don't know. I will say this, that my body or my mind wants to play Warriors again. So I probably, the way I finished off playing Dark Elves, I probably liked them a little more. I was probably down on them when I lost my game versus when I lost the game versus Saurians. I was pretty down on Dark Elves because I got like blown off the board with Magic. Like, it was bad. Like, I got Magic Whistled like completely off the board early, and it hurt. And in the bad play and stuff, it's not just that, but it was like, fuck, man, this sucks. And then I was like, I kind of want to play an army. I don't love shooting. I don't love playing that bullshit, like, sit in the corner and shoot, or the range game, or playing, that high elf 3-bolter Seaguard shit. Like, that's not my style. And I'm not hating on people who play that, like ID and stuff. It's just not my style. I like to be more aggressive. I like to do a little more single model shit. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't like to win or want to win, right? I'm not that kind of player. So, and I think I have the same sentiment with orcs, where I was like, I felt like you needed magic and you needed the splatters to scare people, and then you're kind of more stagnant with your army a lot of the time, and it just wasn't my style. I didn't have a love for it, but I would enjoy it more now. I don't know. I come around to it. It's just like, you always have what you don't play. And the one thing that Warriors have, or a thing that Warriors have, besides being one of the best books, in my opinion, it's that they have no shooting, except for like some bows, random bows. They have range and magic. But besides that, their whole army is built to like fight. And so there is no... You don't feel bad not taking shooting in Warriors, because they don't have any shooting. So they're clearly one of the best books, and you don't need shooting. So that means they have to win by magic and by killing people, if they're that good. Which is great, because it means that I'm not pigeonholed. I'm pigeonholed into no shooting because I don't have any, but that's exactly what I want. I don't want to I don't want to... What's the word? I don't want to handicap myself by forcing another army to play how I want to play Warhammer. I want to pick an army that plays Warhammer how I want to play it. If Beast Herds were still good, as good as they were when I first started playing, 2 or 3 years ago, that's when like cows, Beast Herds were like the big thing. That's the kind of... I probably would have been I would have enjoyed Beast Herds a lot. I think I would have enjoyed old Beast Herds before they got nerfed a lot. That whole cow army, that's still probably decent. I think that style I would have liked a lot, because it has no shooting, it has ambushes which you can do fun stuff with. It's monsters, it's fighting, blah blah blah. I think Warriors do a good job substituting that now. And I've owned a Chaos army. So for the next couple live events, I will be playing Warriors again. I'll do the Herald. It'll be similar. What do I got? Do I got the list? if I had a tournament tomorrow, I have shooting because I have 5 bows. This would probably be the list I run, which is similar to some lists you've seen out there. I think our teammate had, this was flare unit, and this was he had like 2 paired weapons, and he had, this was a shrine. I think one of the bigger change recently has been the Chosen Knights. I think Thomas thought of this or has decided to start using them again. I know some people had like the Chimera Lord in here, and I think that the Chosen Knights are a very nice change to that. So you get another scoring unit. It's not 4 wounds that just dies to a cannon potentially. They can block the Herald even if he has tall. And just like the Flaming Standard goes great with Alchemy. They go great with Alchemy because they get to reroll the wound if they need it by just having the attribute. +1 armor is amazing on them because they have a 2-up save, so they get a lot of value just out of one, the small version. They're surprisingly tough to budge. I think that's one thing I've kind of underestimated about them when I played against Knights, Chosen Knights, is even if you get this beautiful flank charge with a ranked unit, this is an example, you're probably going to do no wounds. They have a lot of strength 5 attacks, 6 attacks, paired weapons attacks because they're greed. They stomp you. And then at the end of the day, they have a banner and their leadership 9 rerollable base and potentially the attribute divine guiding light. So they're actually pretty tough to move for 720, and they went cheaper in points, so that also helps. I don't know, I just think they add a lot to the party. I think the Flaming Banner itself plus the unit helps a lot for some of the meta stuff that's coming out that kind of hurts warriors, like big troll blocks. Like these guys versus troll block, like, should rip it apart. Mainly because of the flaming. Like if you go flaming and they go, because their attacks are pretty garbage versus you, right? They are 4 up, 3 up, and you have a 4-up save, so they gotta spit on you. So they get 8 spits, needing 3s. If 8 are alive. I mean, 8 aren't gonna live through this, because even if they're the -1 to hit versions, if you go paired weapons, they're gonna hit on 3s and 4s with 4 attacks a model. You're probably gonna kill 2 before they even go. So they probably do 4 wounds to you. You probably did 6 or 7. Maybe more, and then it just scales from there. And like they're cheaper and stuff, but I don't know. It just helps. It just helps. Hell, if you charge them and you get the damn Flaming Banner off, which I can't stop, and you get the attribute on them, they're like all dead before you even. They're like half dead before they even go. It's just nice. Versus flies, the Flaming Banner is great because you're not magical, so they get 0 save versus it. And so, like, it's a unit that can eat through flies. So something where, like, the Chimera Lord were, like, is actually almost countered by it. Like, flies with unhinging jaw and trolls. You actually now substitute a unit that can actually fuck him up. And they can die. I mean, they're 720. You don't want them to die, but they go in there and cause a mess. And then you still have all the other good stuff, and I think Forsaken ones are fun. We got Gracie, which is Thomas's Forsaken one, and mine's called Gus the Bus. Anyway, this is like the list. It's nothing special. I'm not here to be like, oh, look at me, I'm so unique and smart. It has nothing to do with that. I just think it's a good list, and I want to play it. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have to talk about. Got some live events coming up, and we'll have videos on that. I'm gonna try. Now that this tournament's over, or at least for me, I play all my games. I'm gonna try to be a little bit better at making some videos, maybe some more specific tactical stuff, like I did with Orcs. I just gotta kind of wrap my head around what I want to make it on. But it's good to be back and talking about stuff. So thanks for listening.